Brent, they say that caregiving is the ultimate act of love, but no one really tells you that caregiving, when carried in isolation, can slowly and quietly erase you. For 20 years now, you've lived a life most people couldn't survive. Your wife, Trudy, was diagnosed with Parkinson's at just the age of 34 years, a time when you both should have been planning and building a future, not managing a disease. While the world saw a strong husband in you, you were privately wondering, I bet, where did I go? Where am I headed? How will I ever emerge from this? You're here today to talk about the things that we're just not allowed to say very often. Things like the resentment that doesn't mean you stopped loving your soulmate, the soul tiredness that sleep just can't fix, and why being strong is often the most dangerous thing a caregiver can do. Welcome to the podcast, Brent. We know you have a lot to say, and we're here to hear it. Brent, welcome to the Caregivers podcast. We're really thrilled that you found time in your extremely busy schedule to join us here today. As many people may not know, but more and more people are getting to know you. You're the founder of HeldLight, a platform that champions caregivers, that illuminates burnout and the positioning of caregivers when looking after people in need with chronic disease, chronic care for their loved ones. And you've certainly made a huge impression so far. We noticed your work, and we're really glad that you can join us on the podcast today. So, you've been looking after your life partner, Trudy, for the better part of almost 2 decades. She was diagnosed at a young age with Parkinson's disease at age 34. Can you describe that sort of feeling you had the first morning when you woke up and you realized that you weren't a husband anymore, but you were now going to be an employee of a disease that steals?
Yeah, the diagnosis came in Scottsdale, Arizona. We used to live in New Mexico. It's where I met her in Albuquerque. And she had something going on. It looked like a duck. It acted like a duck. It talked like a duck, but we were in denial that it was a duck. And the doctor we were seeing, she's amazing, Dr. Diligich, she's still there in Albuquerque. And she said, look, I really believe this is a young-onset Parkinson's. And at the time, her facility was a little bit limited, so we went down to Scottsdale, Arizona, to the Mayo Clinic, paid out of pocket for that one, and got the diagnosis through, I believe it was the PET scan and some muscle testing that gave the definitive, this is a duck. And at the time, it was numbness is the only way to explain it, in kind of a little bit of denial. And I think it was that night that we went back to the hotel once she fell asleep that I had kind of an emotional, because I'm familiar with Parkinson's, seeing it with patients in the different hospitals I've worked in, and numb is probably the best way to describe that initial feeling with learning she had Parkinson's.
And as some of the numbness wore off and you sort of looked introspectively, how did that affect your sense of self and what you, in the immediate term, felt was in store for your relationship?
So the thing with her Parkinson's is, in the beginning, the first year or two, it doesn't seem to be, it's not as bad because she was able to function, she was able to move, and she was responsive to dopa drugs. So other than the little tremor here or there, a little bit of a walking here or there, it didn't affect me too much. But it was about the 4-year mark where she started having falls, she started not being able to work anymore, and then that's when it started to sink in that I'm no longer, my title is my job, and my new title is caregiver. And it caused me at about the 4-year mark to do a serious career change, which got me here to Florida. So in the very beginning, to answer your question, in the very beginning, it didn't affect me too much, but it was about 3 or 4, maybe definitely within the first 5 years is where it really sunk in that our life is different now. And
there's been a series of events and time influence changes in your life since then, prompting you at one point this spring to sort of say, I think I need to tell my story. Mm-hmm. What's left of me is a question we may ask ourselves when we look in the mirror, when we're caregivers. Can you describe the version of Brent that you remember around the time of Trudy's diagnosis? And after your journey, what's the one thing that you miss about that guy, that man who Brent was then compared to today?
Brent then was literally 60 pounds lighter. My hair wasn't this color. I was in the service. I had just got out of the service and I was working at a school in Albuquerque, a military training program. And Brent back then was incredibly in shape. A very active guy. We loved fishing. I loved fishing, and we loved camping and outdoors and hiking together. We had 2 young boys back then. The boys were little. The youngest was still in diapers, and the oldest, I think, was in kindergarten or first grade. Versus Brent right now. I mean, when I look at myself right now on this screen, like, I don't recognize me. I've aged a lot faster than I would expect. I'm a lot heavier now, and my face just in general feels weathered. So Brent back then had a lot more energy. And granted, it was 20 years ago. So, I mean, there's natural aging, but I feel as though, and I look as though I've aged a lot faster than most. A good, for example, is I ran into a really good friend. I haven't seen him in about 5 years. He saw me recently. He's like, bro, you don't look good. So I just feel more drained, for sure, than I did before.
And then now with HeldLight and some of the messaging that you're putting out, I see a momentum there, which will hopefully help you reach a pivot point in that sort of trajectory that you just described, is that you sound and feel more empowered speaking of this. And I think one of the important messages that I got from listening to your post is that you speak, and we certainly are taught that love and love for another is potentially an infinite resources. And certainly when you hit burnout as a caregiver, it doesn't reflect a failure of love when you're burnt out. But is it possible that your love drives your caregiving so much that eventually you hit a point where you cross that sort of slippery slope into a period of resentment, where you actually then resent the whole situation, and it's hard to direct that resentment away from even the person you're caring for, yet it creates this sort of incredible shock in your brain. Like, how can I be thinking this? I mean, that's my soulmate. That's the love of my life.
That happens all the time. So I harp on therapy. It was around 2018 where I kind of hit the darkness. I call that the dark ages. I got exactly what you just said. I started having serious anger issues, and the anger was directed towards my wife. I'm not abusive. I wasn't any of that kind of stuff before the watchers make assumptions, but I was getting very frustrated, and it's hard for me to say this out loud, but there was a time where I was so irritated and so frustrated, I literally lashed out and said, can you just die already so I can get on with my life? And that's not a good thing to say. And the shame and the regret that followed that was almost unbearable. So then I started seeking therapy. I went on a spiritual journey, and I had this vision of HeldLight. And the vision I had was I was walking through the dark. I was completely afraid and I was scared. I didn't know where I was, and there was a little light at my feet, and that little light at the feet was showing me a path. I wasn't aware of what the path was or where it was going, but I slowly followed that path. And as it got brighter and brighter and brighter, I eventually opened up into a big clearing. And in that clearing, I realized I was never in the dark. It was always daylight. And the light at my feet was actually my friends, my family, my coworkers, and my therapist that was showing me the way. Like, you're not in this alone. And then I started a little bit sharing on my personal social account about what I'm going through as a caregiver, because prior to that, I was keeping it all a secret. Everybody knew that my wife was sick, but I wasn't very open about it. And then when I was on the Montel Williams show, he really was like, dude, the military makeover, he's like, you really need to tell your story. You have an incredible story to tell. And once I started sharing is when I realized I'm not in this alone. And then I started realizing my feelings, back to the resentment point, the feelings that I was having were normal, and a lot of people go through that. And so I dove into therapy, and the therapy that tends to work for me these days is, I'm not sure if you're familiar, if you're a guest or familiar with internal family systems, the IFS therapy. That's the one that clicked for me, because it allowed me to realize that there's a part of me that gets really angry and really frustrated, but that part is not mad at Trudy. the part is mad at the situation it's in, and the part used to see the disease and see Trudy as the problem, and that part has learned to go, wait a minute, it's okay to feel this way, but it's not her fault. It's this disease. She didn't choose this. This is not something that she signed up for. And something that I've done, and I've mentioned this with other folks, is I have pictures all over the house now, and right by our bed, I have my favorite photo. It's a huge blown up picture of us in Albuquerque at the Balloon Fiesta, probably 3 years or so into our marriage, maybe 2 years, because our kid was still crawling. But it's my favorite photo of her and my boys. And when I see her in the bed and her dyskinesia is out of control and she's just not doing well, and I feel that emotion surge, that part of me surges forward, I look up at the picture and I'm reminded, like, that's the woman I married. What I see in the bed is a disease, but the woman in the photo is still there inside. Her soul is still there. And that usually, like, gives me the, hey dude, time out. And then that'll cause me to kind of break away. I'm like, okay, I can't do this right now. I need to walk out of the room, and I'll walk out of the room. Now I can still be mad. I can still scream in the car. I can still like get frustrated and dump. And sometimes I just make a video about it and post it, but it redirects the energy so that I'm not taking it out on her. And what I'm learning is when I'm honest and real about that, and I think that's why I've done, I guess, relatively well so far on social media, is I'm saying the thing out loud that other caregivers are doing that just won't say. So
and you're saying it in the moment, and you're actually witnessing the healing power of being able to say it. And when it's unrefined and raw, and you attested to that really interestingly, I thought, you don't know who you're angry at. Your partner, the disease, God, whichever God you worship, you just don't know, but you've now been able to compartmentalize it in a way that's meaningful for you, but also reinforces that relationship with, the one who lives in your heart, and that's Trudy.
Everything I do is like and it sounds like you've looked at a lot of my content. None of that's scripted. So, and there's a couple. I
can tell, actually.
There's a couple of them there's a couple that I did script, and then when I look back on them, I'm like, oh, that's terrible. This morning on my way to, so this morning we had a little bit of a rough start, and she was being so stubborn. Sorry, I might cuss every now and then. Hopefully you can bleep that out unless your followers are okay with it. But this morning she was being very stubborn. It was really annoying. And on my way to work, I just could not stop thinking about her stubbornness. And so right before I went over the bridge, I pulled off by the river, and I made the video that I just made this morning that I think you said you saw about stubbornness and the personality as people with disease. That just came out. And I'm like, all right. And then I
haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, it was this morning, and I'm like, okay. And then I just let it go. I just pushed it and said, let's see where this goes. So everything I do with my online stuff is right. It's on the moment. Like, it happens right then and there, and I might film it right away. I may not post it until the next day. There's been a few where I'm like, let's not post that one. So, but what I've done is and again, I have a life coach that I see now. She's out in Alaska. She's the one that really has specialized in that internal family systems with me. And what I've been doing is with this platform and I don't even know what HeldLight really is, other than a bunch of folks that I want to talk to each other about real and honestly what they're going through.
Yes,
it's not a company. I'm not a business. I'm not selling anything. I'm not trying to make money off of any of this stuff. I'm just trying to put it out there and get people to talk about it, which sounds like what you're trying to do as well. But what I'm rambling about is, now that I've started doing this, and now that I'm using that form of internal family systems, and I spit out what's going on, it allows an outlet for me to get it out. And then it allows an outlet for people to get back to me, and it keeps me in check. Like, it keeps me accountable. So especially if I'm going to become this dude that people look to as advice, then I need to live by example. Like, I need to keep, this keeps me accountable, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I think so. And I think after the initial intervention, which seems to have helped reset things, you need to keep at it, right? Otherwise, your authenticity, may slide. So yeah. I think the fact that you stay committed to it is obviously a big investment, and certainly very noble. Society speaks of losing yourself in moments of crisis, but as a caregiver, you describe it as this sort of slow erosion of self. I mean, how does a person lose big parts, if not in their entirety of themselves, with respect to their identity without actually noticing it's happening? Like, did you witness it over time, or like, did you just sort of hit this moment where like, oh my God, there's nothing left?
You know what? The first Facebook. So you know how Facebook will give you like, remember this memory from 5 years ago? So I think that was the first time I saw like an old video or an old image. And I remember looking, I can't remember, it was maybe a Christmas moment where she was talking and was able to pick up the baby. And it hit me like, holy shit, like that was 10 years ago. You know, look how good she looked then, and then look now. Like that's because with Parkinson's, it's a really slow, you know, they say the long goodbye, but when you're living it every day, you don't see the results of it until you look back. Or like I said earlier, when you have somebody who hasn't seen you in a while and they literally say, dude, you look like crap. Like what's going on with you? But when you look at yourself in the mirror every day, I look like crap now, but you know, I just, it's just such a slow progression for me and for her that you don't realize just how bad it is until you see something like I hate the Facebook memories tend to sting a little bit when I see some of those.
And when the realizations sort of come to light, it must be a total sense of overwhelm, right? And then it just sort of funnels into your everyday life, and you start carrying that with you. And then, you know, the seeds, what people are terrified to talk about, which is that whole paradox of resentment, which starts like you look back and you look forward and you're like, oh my God. And, you know, I think we need to be clear, resentment and those feelings of angst and distress, which I think really inform any form of resentment that might develop as a caregiver, don't cancel out the love that we have for our partner, but they certainly can generate shame as a result. Yeah. And how have you dealt with some of the shame that's arisen as you look back or you think about things? And I mean, at the same time, it's the loyalty that we have to our partner, to the person we caregive for, that puts us in that situation. And we can't deny that our loyalty is well-intended and it's built on a solid foundation.
Shame and Regret is the name of a bar in Colorado Springs. And every time it's a speakeasy. Every time I go to Colorado Springs for work, I found it, I don't know how many years back, and I saw this sign. I'm like, oh my God, just the name of that place resonates with me. And I'm like I mentioned earlier, like when I get really, really frustrated and I get angry, you know, anger is a go-to emotion. You probably know that as a physician. Anger is the easy answer. And I'm not really angry. I'm sad. I'm lonely. I'm hurt. You know, I'm depressed. But it's easier for us to be angry about it, especially as men, than it is to cry about it. You know, and so they call it the anger iceberg in therapy, and anger is the tip of the iceberg, and below the surface are all your real emotions, your true feelings. But it's just so much easier to be angry, and resentment could be roped up into that anger area. It is hard sometimes to separate the frustration, the fight or flight feelings that I get from the love and compassion that you have, especially when it's such a chronic, long-term, oh my God, I just need to sleep. Last night, I did not have a good night. Her dyskinesia was so bad. I think I fell asleep around 11:30 and then I woke up at 3:30 and I've been up ever since. And so that's not sustainable. And so typically when I have my frustrations and I just lose it, and I just need to leave and take a break and let her just sit for a minute or let the caregiver take care of her, it's usually sleep deprivation that's building up to that. But I guess to answer your question, I wrote a song called Love and Fear. It's a friend of mine. This is not a plug. It's a shameless plug, I guess. But my friend Donovan Chapman's a country music artist. Mm-hmm. And the song, you can Google it, Love and Fear by Donovan Chapman. I wrote those lyrics. And the song is about the balance between love of the one that you care for, not just her, but your family, and the fear of trying to keep the ship afloat, and the fear of trying to hold it all together and not lose your shit while still loving the people you love. And so that's the name of that song. And so when you were saying earlier about the love and the balance, like the first thing that pops in my head is love and fear. You have to find this perfect balance, and it's almost impossible. It's nearly impossible to balance those.
Well, especially if you're not equipped with the tools. I mean, my journey and this project and many discussions have made me realize that caregivers of all sorts, whether professional or non-professional, really are not equipped with the tools. They may, there may be a tick box on some curriculum somewhere in the School of Social Work or medicine or nursing, and yet the 1 hour on self-care or navigation or the 2 hour lecture, whatever, was done, and that's good. The curriculum addresses it, but it's
some bullshit written by somebody who's never been a caregiver. That's the stuff that bothers me, is when I see publications or TED Talk type things or just little spiels about what you need to do as a caregiver or a therapist that tells me what to do as a caregiver. I'm like, have you ever been do you know what I'm like? If you don't know what it's like to walk in my shoes, don't tell me how to do it. Like, I want to talk to people who's been through it, and I think that's why I resonate with a lot of the people I resonate with, is because I'm going through it right now.
That authenticity is raw and it's palpable, and it's unquestionable. With that idea, though, like, we talk about the strength that it takes, and caregivers of all sorts, whether it's professional or non-professional, there's a certain inherent praise that goes towards them for their strength, for their resilience, for their unflappability, that they can just keep going. But I think you've argued that notion of being strong and staying strong and just affirming your strength and carrying on can actually be a seed for some internal destruction as well.
100%. 100%.
Why does that happen? Like, where are we? What do you have can you share an idea? Because I think about it often. Like, what is the self-fulfilling prophecy here? That is it because of what we were taught? Is it about our sociological blueprint? Is it about the echoes of what mom and dad told us growing up, or the person who raised us? Like,
all of the above.
And then there's there's that. I'm doing a good deed, so therefore, maybe I don't need to look after myself because, the person up there, whoever I worship's keeping an eye on me because, God darn it, I'm doing something good for the world. Yet, you're fair game just like anybody else. If you don't take care of yourself or you buy into the eternal strength, you can fall hard and fall fast.
Yeah. When you first started asking the question, the first word that popped in my head is ego. It took me a long time to admit that I needed help. Not just help for my mental health, but help for my kid, help for my wife, help in general, and I talked about this in one of the podcasts that hasn't dropped yet about taking care of your kids. Like, when my wife first really started struggling, I put all my energy into her needs and my job, and I neglected my kid. And it took a long time for me to accept that there are other families out there. One of his best friends, the mom's like, hey, let us take him on a trip. Let us take him to Disney World. And my ego was not letting me do that. That's my job. I'm supposed to take care of my kid. And there was a critical event occurred, and my ego finally broke. And like, hey, it does take a village. Get over yourself because your kids are suffering too. And ego is the biggest hurdle in the early days of caregiving that was in the way. I was in the way of my own self because my alpha male, and you're right, the upbringing, my grandfather and my mother taught me the man takes care of the family. Nobody else helps you. That's your job.
Vulnerability is not an option. Crying is not an option.
Asking for financial help is not an option. That's a failure on you. Until I went bankrupt and lost my house to foreclosure, and then had to do a GoFundMe to get a lawyer to help us win the Medicaid case that allows us to even have a caregiver in the house. That was humiliating at first for me to ask for money to get help, to get a lawyer, ego is the problem. And it's not just because I'm a man ego. Women are just as egotistical as we are. But getting out of your own way sometimes is the best medicine for you and your care partner, or the person you're caring for.
And, we always think of the word ego and think of like the darkness of what ego, someone who's ego, but ego is actually a framework that allows us to make some sense of the world. And it's informed by our early, childhood experiences and the values we're taught. And mean, it's a way of coping with the world. It just sometimes it's a bit too strong and it doesn't create the open-minded environment where, as you say, you start sort of saying, okay, I need some help here. And, help is available.
I'm a fan of, I don't know how much philosophy. I'm a fan of Carl Jung and the shadow work. And that's when I first started learning about my ego. And then that spilled over into the internal family systems. And it finally clicked for me that ego is just one part of the many parts of me that make up all my different personalities that will allow me to work together.
It's an incredible dynamic. And we talk about strength and plowing and the fatigue and the exhaustion. And the notion of being physically tired sometimes takes on proportions that many others have no idea about. But there's another level of tired. And I'd love to know how do you compare soul tired versus physical tired? I imagine it's just not even comparable.
Yeah. So, sleep deprivation is the root cause of most of what I call my evil.
Lots of research to support that too, right?
Yeah. I average, because I'm on a CPAP now, which has been helpful actually, but according to my CPAP app, and I have one of those beds that can measure my sleep, like it lets me know if I got up to pee or whatever. But according to those two, I'm averaging Monday through Friday, I average about 5 hours a night. That's not good. Now, the weekends, I get a little bit more because what I do is I turn off her 6 a.m. alarm because she has a med that she takes at 6 a.m. and I turn that off. And on Friday night and Saturday night, so into Saturday morning, Sunday morning, I'll get about 7 hours of sleep. So, but you can't do 5 hours, 5 hours, 5 hours, 5 hours, and then 7. Like it just isn't enough. So when I'm sleep deprived, I'm confused sometimes. Cognitively, I can't concentrate. I drink way too much coffee, and it's just not sustainable. Is I guess what I'm getting at. I actually get better sleep when I travel because I'll put her in the facility. And then I'll travel on a work trip and I don't have to worry about her meds and getting her to bed and waiting for the dyskinesia to settle down because I can't fall asleep till she falls asleep. And then I always wake up before her and I'll wake up a couple times in the middle of the night because she does talk in her sleep or wiggle in her sleep. And then I stay awake because I'm like looking over her to make sure she's okay. So when I travel, I actually get really good sleep and I get really rejuvenated. So that's a plug for respite. Like you have to take advantage of respite so that you can kind of fill your sleep cup because if that cup runs out, I break every time. When I have a complete breakdown, like a panic attack, or I just kind of lose it. Now that because I'm keeping a good track of what were all the stressors that led up to that, and the common denominator is sleep deprivation. So, and then physically, I'm eating like crap. I'm not working out. I live right next to a gym. I have a gym behind my office, and I do surf on occasion from the surfboard in the back, but I just why am I not going to the gym as much? Because I'm just, I said it the other day to somebody, I'm like, I'm not lazy. I'm just tired. There's a different, there's a difference between lazy and I'm just tired.
Understandable. And that physical tired can then spread into deeper parts of us. And I imagine it just starts spiraling deeper.
I don't know if you notice it. It's happening right now. I get this twitch in my eye when I'm sleep deprived. It's clicking right now. I'm like, oh, this is annoying.
I get that too. Yeah. I mean, sleep deprivation as well. I had this one crazy experience when I was early in my career where I was writing this big research grant. And I think I went on 3 hours sleep for about 18 days in a row. God. And, while still being, gainfully employed and everything else. And I'll never forget that. I always look back and say, what was I thinking? And thank God to my partner at the time who was able to rein things in. But the effects of sleep, and I think the research that's looked at it in terms of the compounding effects on our health, as you've mentioned to me, are significant. I think we're going to take a break. Our producer, Fred, has a couple of questions for you as well. So we're going to bring him on the podcast as well. Fred, how's it going?
Earlier in the discussion, you were talking about the need to really say the things out loud that people are afraid to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, I guess, what was the most powerful thing you were afraid to say out loud? Like the thing that you couldn't believe that you were holding inside? And then on the heels of that, like what would have happened to you if you had kept that bottled in? Because I think that's something a lot of caregivers do. There's maybe it's more than one thing, but there's something that people are terrified to admit to themselves and say out loud, and then the consequences when they don't do that is what.
So when the first question was, when was the need to say the thing out loud? It actually happened quite a while ago. It was almost 7 years ago. My wife at the time follows, or she still does follow, there's this really well-known Parkinson advocate out there. Her name is Heather Kennedy. She used to go by Kathleen Kiddo. Now, she has since come off of social media because her disease has progressed, but my wife loved her because of her message, and it was like a voice for her. And we got into a conversation and we were talking about the healthcare system. It was before I finally went and got the lawyer to get her on Medicaid to get her the care she has, but it was also shortly after I went through bankruptcy and foreclosure. I had already been through foreclosure, but I finally went for bankruptcy. And we were talking about the healthcare system here in the United States and how broken it is. And so she's like, you should make a video about that. She's the first person to say, you should do what I do. And so I did. I had a YouTube account under my full name. I since deleted all that. But to answer your question, I went on a rant and I called out the local congressman about how broken and how fucked up the healthcare system is. And specifically, and I mentioned it earlier in a video on my platforms about CNAs. And I said this, I go, make this make sense. Why is it that my taxpayer money goes from the federal government to the state takes a cut, the state gives it to the healthcare company, in our case, Humana takes a cut, and then Humana gives it to a third party, and the third party takes a cut, and then the person who's in my living room right now, who walks through the door to take care of my wife, is an independent contractor, and she gets pennies on the dollar. Like, make this make sense. And at the same time, why is my wife being denied Social Security disability and Social Security disability income, which she still does not have? And it had to do with age. So I was so angry. And I went on this crazy rant and I posted that. It went nuts. And then I got a little bit of shit from my employer about it because I called out the congressman. And so I since deleted it. So your question was, when was the first time you did that? That was it. But then more recently was when I kind of got just the universe pushed me in to speak your truth again. And that was back in May when I launched that first TikTok video. That was the first question. That was a long-winded answer. And I forgot the second question already. Oh, snap. You'll snap. Dude, I've been in the emergency room a couple of times I thought I was having a heart attack. So I'm a paramedic and I've been a paramedic since 1997. And I don't really work anymore as a paramedic. I just do my annual refreshers to keep current. But I felt substernal chest pain, that crushing elephant feeling. Doc, I know you know what I'm talking about here. Mm-hmm. And it was radiating to my left side. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm having a heart attack. I called my boss, who is an ER doctor, and I'm like, I can't go to the hospital right now because who's going to watch Trudy while I go? And she's like, Brent, you're having a panic attack. And I was in total denial. And this was not too long ago. It was prior to my 2018 kind of healing experience. But if you hold this in, if you bottle up these feelings and you don't find an outlet to release the frustration of being a caregiver, you're going to break. And I have this tattoo on my hand for a reason. Any of the followers that know that what that means, that's pause. Your story continues. I got suicidal. I was talked into taking antidepressants. Now, I've always had an issue with antidepressants, SSRIs, and I'm not a doctor, and please correct me if I'm wrong from a medical perspective. I just believe that there's a black label for suicidal ideations on these medications for a reason, and I know that they work very well for some people. They did not work for me. And so 3 weeks into being on an SSRI, I had a gun in my hand at 3 a.m. and I wanted to blow my freaking brains out. And all of this to say, it was around the time that I was not seeking help and I was keeping my my stuff to myself. My ego was in the way, and I wasn't seeking the therapy I needed. And to fix all that, I mean, eat healthy and exercise are obviously the way to go. But if you don't talk about your feelings, if you don't share what you're going through, if you don't do what I'm now doing with this platform, you're going to break. And to me, that's what breaking looked like. I thought I was going to die from a heart attack, and then I actually wanted to die from a medication, serious side effect. So hopefully that answers the question.
It does. What's the scariest thought that you've had around this entire process? And I know that's a lot because you've been through a lot over the last 20 years, but is there one sort of fear that keeps coming back that you have to keep sort of facing down?
Yep.
And maybe that's something that other caregivers likely have in common, but maybe you could share that fear and see if it resonates with the people listening.
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. What's your biggest fear? So I'll say this. When I was in the Air Force, I was a special operator. You can look up what an Air Force pararescueman is. I used to literally jump out of planes for a living. I had no fear. Now I have fears. My number one fear is dying before my wife. If I die before her, who's going to take care of her? Who's going to look out for her? I have a son. He just turned, he's about to turn 19, but he's not ready to deal with that on his own. So when I'm asked, what's your number one fear? It's dying before my wife. And oh, by the way, if I don't do lifestyle changes now, is all this weight gain that I've got, my cholesterol's, I'm pre-metabolic, I'm pre-diabetic. I just got my calcium score back. It actually wasn't that bad. But if I don't make lifestyle changes, I will die before my wife. And I know that there's some statistical data out there, maybe Doc, you can allude to it, that shows that caregivers, there's a certain percentage of caregivers that die before the person they care for.
About 30%.
So that's my fear, dying before she does.
Thanks for sharing that.
You've said on your platform that caregivers cannot carry this alone, but there's listeners today who are maxed out and are sitting saying they have no time, they may be low on money, they have no extra energy because they're physically exhausted. But in your words, what does not carrying it alone actually look like in practice? How do we not carry it alone? Like, what do we need to do to sort of say, okay, I'm finally not carrying this alone?
So when I get people that will hit me up on messages or comments like, I'm all alone and I got nobody. This is my message to them. Bullshit. There's this magic box in your pocket that you messaged me on. And in this magic box, there's all kinds of caregiver support groups on all kinds of different platforms. And you're death scrolling anyway. That's what we do. It's a coping mechanism. So why don't you death scroll in one of those support groups, whether it be the one that I'm working on or the one that you're hosting here, Doc, but you can find your tribe right here in this magic box. And I get it because I don't have time I've been to the codependency groups. I went to all these Parkinson support groups, and who has time for that, But you do have time to go through this. And so when people say, I don't have time for that, I say, pull out your phone and look at your screen time. And then I call bullshit because I promise you have time. And I'm learning that through this magic box, through social media, that I do have time to just lean. That's the point of HeldLight, is we hold the light for each other in the dark because we're there too. And and I have quite a few folks now that I have their personal phone numbers. I've given them my personal phone number. We just do check-ins. There's a lady in Houston. She's got a terrible story that she's dealing with a traumatic brain injury to her husband. And every now and then I'll just get a text from her like, are you okay? Or I'll text her, hey, how are you doing today? That's all it takes. So that's one way to do it. Now, that does not take away from professional help. You really do need to seek a mental health therapist, whether it's an actual therapist or a psychologist or even a life coach can be very, very helpful. There's a caveat to that. It's expensive, and they can get very expensive. And I too have been using AI on occasion. I use ChatGPT. I'll pull up, I have a folder called health, mental, and in that subfolder is mental health. And I will rant into ChatGPT what I'm going through right now. And that's a safe space for me to just say the things that I don't want anybody else to hear. And it It's not a therapist. It's a freaking AI. Nothing, replaces a healthcare professional. But just being able to dump that thought and dump that energy into it, and then
cathartic energy release is huge. Just even though it's a different medium, for sure.
Yeah, and then I'll say, give me some resources. When you're done ranting, give me some resources, and that's how I found one of the therapists I have. Is I just used Google search, find a therapist in my area that specializes in caregiving burnout, and boom, there they are. So when people say they have no help and it's impossible, or I live out in the middle of nowhere, I'm like, do you have internet? Because if you do, this magic thing in your pocket can help you.
Seems like you can steal little moments with that very easily. Mm-hmm. But for the person listening who's maxed out, how do they actually start reclaiming those parts of themselves without actually feeling like they're abandoning the person they love and the person they care for? Like it's this bartering between self and other. And do you have to go through negotiations? I mean, not everybody. I mean, something really resonated before is that you mentioned that when work does call you away, and I know Trudy's got some respite care provided at that time while you're away, you can actually sort of catch up during the downtime and, maybe hit the gym, get that good long walk that you like. And I know walking and just sort of timing out on the beach is an important outlet for you. So timing out in other places, I'm sure, has its place. But for the person who's just trying to initiate that and they're torn between, like, how do I choose me over the cause? What would be your advice to them?
You have to. It's not so. If you don't take care of yourself, like I told you just a minute ago, my biggest fear is death. If I die before her, who's going to take care of her? And I'm sure somebody's going to hear this or see this and go, yeah, I feel that way too. Well, listen, if you don't get outside and get the sunlight on you and go for a walk and make healthy lifestyle changes, and I'm not saying, become David Goggins and run 50 miles a day, but just if you don't move and get up and get outside and make small, even if it's a 20-minute micro break, if you do not make those choices, then you will die before them. And that biggest fear of yours will come true. And so anybody that I have a tiny little sunroom. Now, I'm going to just say, I don't always practice what I preach here. I have this little sun.
Try.
I try. Yeah, I try.
Well, that's a lot more than sometimes people are willing to offer. So that's a good start.
If you have a space in your house or outside that's the size of a yoga mat, then you have the space you need to exercise, whether it's push-ups or sit-ups or squats, and there's tons of workouts online. Just move. And I'm a huge fan of just get outside. The best medicine is sunlight, the outdoors. This is God's great creation, and it was created for you to enjoy. Go enjoy it. Now you guys that live in Canada, maybe not so much because it's freezing ass cold up there, but try your best to get outside and let the sun hit you, Yeah,
a good winter sun, though, has its place on a gorgeous snowy day. It's
quiet.
If you haven't tried it, you got to try it.
I miss that about New Mexico, where everybody thinks New Mexico is desert, but where we lived was at 7,000 feet. And when it would snow, we'd get 3 or 4 feet of snow. And I just remember how peaceful and quiet the outside was because how the snow dampens all the noise.
Absolutely.
So get outside. That's my answer to you is how do we start? It starts with getting off your ass and getting outside,
Absolutely. And that snow reflects the full moonlight. That's one of my favorites.
And be okay with it. Be okay with, because this is so cheesy and cliche, but that when you fly, they say put the oxygen mask on yourself before your kids. Like that, people use that. That's true. Like if you don't take care of yourself first, then you're not going to be able to take care of them.
Understandable. Mm-hmm. How do you stay present emotionally 20 years in? I think you've mastered physical strength, but there's that emotional persistence that needs to keep you at the game, keep you on top of the mission. How do you stay emotionally connected and emotionally present throughout this without going numb?
I learned transcendental meditation. So I went through I have the luxury of being a veteran. I went through a veterans program that taught me transcendental meditation, and you don't have to get formal training on that, but learning to just do mindful and there's tons of videos on YouTube how to do this, but meditation, grounding, Yeah, I'm a huge fan of grounding techniques. When I say get outside, do it barefoot. Go outside and let your body ground into the earth. But meditation has been a huge, huge thing for me. I say it a lot in some of my videos, like just give yourself 20 minutes. And that's all transcendental meditation is 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. By the way, the weeks that I stay regular with it, I do really well.
Mm-hmm.
The weeks, remember I was telling you, like I have my moments where I break and then I look back and I'm like, the common denominator was sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's also there's another layer to that is, you also haven't been doing your daily meditation. Why? Well, because I was tired and I forgot about it, or I didn't want to. So.
Sleep can act as the habit breaker. But I think a key message, and this has come out in the habit literature as well, is that once you've kind of established a habit, if you do have circumstances which stand in the way, it's not like a cataclysmic. It's not like when you're playing snakes and ladders and you're just about to win and you slide down that one long snake and you're down to the bottom of the board.
Yeah.
Like you can regain your habits pretty quick. You can jump back on the horse really quick. And it's not like this sort of catastrophic, oh my God, I missed it for a couple of days, I have to start from scratch. No, there's actually some built-in actual ability to be able to get back on top of it quickly. So,
and to your point, let's just pretend you did slide all the way to the bottom of the ladder. Who cares? That's okay. Shit happens.
Mm-hmm.
Get back. It's okay to fall down. That's what this tattoo is. Knock down 7 times, stand up 8. Who cares how many times you fall down? What matters is that you get back up.
I have a question for you. You may find this funny, but in one of your posts, you're standing on the beach before work, barefoot, and the waves were coming in.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like better, the wave coming in on your feet or the feeling of the water going back and pulling the little bits of sand through your feet as it's going back away?
A little bit of both. My son, my youngest son, Christian, tells me, Dad, every time we go surfing together, I feel like I'm baptized. Like it just washes it away. And so the ocean there is a really good book. I'm a big book reader. That's another thing for the listeners. I started reading a ton of books. In fact, sitting right here, this is not a plug. I'm not being made for this, but if you have somebody with dementia and you haven't read Emma Willis's book, The Unexpected Journey, then you're doing it wrong. This is an incredible book. But this talks about healing power of water a little bit, but it's the Blue Mind, and it's a book on how water heals us. We're literally born in it, So to answer your question, the wave action, the way it hits me, and it's like it blows it away or washes it away. It takes away the negative energy. It really is a powerful healing experience. So it's not so much the water hitting me as it is the water washing it away, whatever it is.
Does it help wash grief away?
Yeah. It just feels. I mean, there's times because I do surf, and if I surf. Well, we're in Florida, so the waves aren't exactly good all the time. But if we do have a good swell from a hurricane and I'm surfing regularly, I'm a very different person to be around. And the way I get that in is I end up having to take time off from work. So I'm fortunate enough that my office is literally across the street from the beach. So like, hey boss, I'm going to take a 2-hour lunch, and I'll go surf. So if I'm in a regular rotation, I feel amazing. But even if there's no waves, if I just go get in the ocean and just sit in the ocean, it heals me. I can't explain it. It's pure magic, but there's definitely some science behind the healing power of the water and the salt. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
Well, no, I think it does answer it beautifully, actually. I've been drawn to the water since I was my earliest memories at the cottage with my grandfather, so I understand water completely.
And I'll say this, I won't turn the camera because this room is disgusting off camera with all the Christmas stuff, but I made a cold plunge. And you guys in Canada don't have to make a cold plunge. You just go outside. But I started following Wim Hof, holotropic breathing. The holotropic breathing helps too. And he has a couple of YouTube videos. You just follow along. There's a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced. And I started doing his breathing exercises, and I made a cold plunge. YouTube search it. I just bought a freezer from the local Home Depot here in the United States, and I converted it into a cold plunge for like $800. And so I'll use that cold plunge and I'll do a 3-minute dip in the mornings. There's science behind this. It just works. When I cold plunge on a regular basis, I feel so much better. Now, some people with heart there needs to be a disclaimer.
Yeah.
So
there's a disclaimer at the end of this episode.
Okay, good. All right, so
you've talked about acknowledging grief instead of fighting it. How does it feel like for individuals starting the journey who may realize that they need to, at one point, start mourning the person who's still sitting right across the dinner table from them?
Yeah, I learned this a long time ago in paramedic school. The grieving process is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And I was in denial when we first got it. I've definitely went through the bargaining phase where we paid out of pocket for a lot of different, magic cures that don't work. If it's too good to be true, it's absolutely too good to be true. Mm-hmm. Like I know you as a doctor probably get super annoyed when you see some herbal garbage that's and not all herbal supplements are bad. I'm just saying, it when you see it, like that's not going to work. And we spent a lot of money on that crap. And then I went through that phase, the bargaining phase, and then the anger phase. I've kind of lived in and out of that. And then of course, depression and anger go hand in hand. And the acceptance phase is the hard part. And I think I'm there now. This is cliche. The long, slow goodbye. Like we really, especially with people with Parkinson's, or it is a young-onset Parkinson's, it's a really long, slow goodbye. I'm at terms with the reality of there's no happy ending to this story. You know what I mean?
No.
So
I don't know. What comes to mind is like who as a caregiver, who am I going to be when this journey ends? And if your caregiving role were to disappear next week, what would be left of Brent, and where would Brent go next? What would Brent need to do?
It's funny you brought that up. I can't remember the content, but I made some videos about the frustrations of caregiving, and I got flooded with people saying, hey, careful what you wish for, because when they go away, it's even more, it's loneliness. I've made a bunch of videos about being lonely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've had several people reach out to me and say it's even more lonely after they're gone. I'm like, wow, like the person caring for a quadriplegic who's on a vent or my heart breaks for how much they do. And then to think about how lonely they become after the person dies like that, I would have thought it would have been peaceful for them. Like finally they're at rest and they're in the next life. And good for you. You found peace, and they've moved on into a peaceful next life if you believe in it. And you, the person still here, finally get to have some peace. And then the person says, "No, dude, I'm even more lonely now than I was before," because their identity changes. We change our identity. Our identity becomes caregiver, and then when you're no longer the caregiver, then your identity changes again, and you become the widow or the widower. And I haven't experienced that yet, but I've had some folks tell me, hey man, just so you know, like when this comes to an end, that loneliness is sometimes worse on the other side of that. And when that happens, I'll do the things I need to do to get through it then too. So.
Well, it's a process just like any other. When your identity is steeped in ritual and in cause and action, it needs a reboot. It needs a reevaluation, a reassessment. I mean, it's kind of what professionals face at the time of retirement. And this is a dedication, if not bigger than any professional dedication, as you describe it, and as I'm sure many caregivers feel. So you alluded to that you're sitting in the Christmas room, or that's where that's your staging room for all the Christmas gear.
Now it's just full of wrapping paper that's already wrapped all the presents. I need to clean this room.
Trudy, I understand, loves Christmas, and it's her favorite time of year.
Yeah.
How do you find the light at this time of season and this time of the year, and the courage to face it after your 20-year journey, knowing how important Christmas is to you and to Trudy? Does imaginative prayer help in this strong season of togetherness and warm feelings?
Yeah, so Christmas for me was never a thing. I'm not somebody who just gets ate up with, it's Christmas. But when you become a parent, it becomes a thing. And for her, it's definitely her favorite season. it gets harder every year. So folks who have kids, like, when they're little, Christmas is awesome because they believe in Santa and the elf on the shelf is real. And I don't know if you guys do that in Canada, but and there's this magic associated with it. But once they learn that Santa's not real, oh, sorry, you might have to bleep that out in case you have little followers. but once they,
hopefully not that young.
Okay. Well, there might be an adult up there somewhere that's like, what? What do you mean? So it's harder and harder to especially try to buy for a teenager because they're difficult. But what do you? I this year especially, I'm like, I don't want to buy another damn gift that's affiliated with her disease. Mm-hmm. I actually made a post about that. It has, I think, 80,000 views on TikTok alone.
A lot of suggestions. I noticed that you had a lot of suggestions of what to get Trudy. You must have felt that people had your back.
Yeah, they did. I thought it was awesome. And so I don't know when this is going to post, but I've made my choice. I was actually going to make a video about it after Christmas. Like, I've made my choice. She can't hear this, but it's the spa treatment. So we're going to go with that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, that's the answer. And a lot of folks that were making comments don't know the whole story. Like, hey, take her on a trip. Like, I can't get her through an airport. Like, take her to she can barely walk sometimes, but the spa she can do. So thanks for all the suggestions. So it gets hard because I don't want to be the one that just keeps buying a gift that is like reminding them of, look, you're up and you're sick, and here's a thing to remind you of that as a gift for Christmas. So that's hard. And then the other thing that's hard about Christmas is now that the boys are grown and the one is out of the house and the other one's not around very often, and her family is all passed away. Her mom's passed. Her father, by the way, had Parkinson's as well. Her mother died from cancer. And her I guess kind of another issue is her sister, her one biological full-blooded sister, died from MS, and her half-brothers and sisters don't live around here. So she has no immediate family. And so the closest immediate family is my immediate family. And so we're 3 hours away. So it just doesn't feel the same as it did before. And you mentioned, I heard you mention the imaginative prayer, which is something I'm a huge fan of. There's a really good book on this called Seeing is Believing by Greg Boyd. And I'll just close my eyes and kind of think through imagery, because I'm not good at saying prayer words. But if I think through the imagery and I try to imagine what the positive outcome would be, or I imagine what I want it to be, whether it comes true or not, it just makes me feel good. One of the things I do for her is I'll imagine a beam of light hitting her body while she's laying in the bed. And that beam of light is just calming her down. Now, sometimes it actually does, but what it really does is calms me down.
If we consider the millions of caregivers out there and the statistics that we're now hearing in terms of just those people who are providing informal caregiving for relatives, for next of kin, people who are at home working, putting in hours, spending money, and dedicating huge chunks of themselves to caregiving, there's always going to be a certain number of them who are drowning. What would be your message to them tonight as they're sitting, listening, and feeling like there's not much air left and the water is just coming up a little bit too high?
So I say this in a video, all white water leads to calm. So all whitewater rapids eventually lead to calm waters. And that's an image that I use a lot with my, you had brought up the imaginative prayer. That's an image that I use a lot when I'm having a panic attack. I'll close my eyes and I'm caught in the whitewater rapid. And I know that on the sides of me, because it's steep walls, I can't get out of it. But I know that this rapid is going to push me downstream. Now, you may go over a waterfall, you might hit a rock or two, but just let it eventually will get better. The question is how long does it take? But I tell myself that all the time. All whitewater rapids eventually lead to calm waters. And so to the listeners that feel like they're in the complete total darkness, I'll say this. I know I've been there, and sometimes I'm there too. Sometimes I fall off the ladder, and that's okay. I just have to keep telling myself every day will be a different day. Every day is a new day. And I just have to believe that it'll get better. I have to believe that. I'm a big fan of karma, and I think that we're all filling a karma cup, those of us that are full-time caregivers. And I think there will be a reward, whether that reward is in this life or the next, I just believe that there will be. And that helps me. That helps me be okay with the life I'm in. It's the life that was given to me. I didn't choose this life. It was the life I was given, and I got to live it.
It sounds to me like you're present with it and doing your best to accept that offering. Your analogy about the whitewater rapids, though, if you think of someone in a canoe or a kayak or you don't just lean back and float down the rapids hoping to get to calm water. You got to keep paddling.
Yeah.
It's not just getting through the rapids, it's paddling through the rapids. And I think that was a really important message that I heard from what you said too. And that I would echo is that it's not just hoping to get to the calm water, but it's paddling the hell through it and looking forward and seeing where the next things you need to paddle around, but knowing that the calm water's ahead.
Yeah. Especially you guys up north, it's going to eventually open up. You'll get through it.
Well,
the message here is don't give up and keep paddling. I never thought about it as a kayaker because I've never really done whitewater kayaking. I just, in my mind, when I think of it, I'm swimming in it and I'm drowning in it. And what I do is I relax, I take a deep breath, I let my body float, and I just let go and let it take me where it needs to take me, and be okay with it.
So I guess the flip side too is that if you turn your boat around and you're trying to paddle upstream in the rapids, that may not be your best best energy spent on hoping to get an outcome. So there's a couple of messages lined up in this analogy, which I really love. Again, being drawn to the water since my earliest memories. I'd like to take the moment here to just thank you for what you do. I've indirectly been a caregiver, I've been a caregiver professionally, and I've witnessed my father caregive for 4 seniors, and my mom care for extended family, and I was in between helping them juggle and do other things. And then through my own work, dedicate parts of myself, of course, to the cause. But what you've achieved and what you're doing for others is very special, and it's noticeable. And I'd like to thank you for it. And I've learned a lot from watching your posts and listening to you, and I hope you continue. I understand you're about to or have started a podcast with a colleague, Esther. Yes, I saw that first. Can you tell me a little bit about how you and Esther came up with this idea of doing what the name of the podcast is and where you're headed with it?
Yeah, I don't know. We're just making it up as we go. So Esther, like you, found me on my posts, and she has Parkinson's disease, and she's quite literally the spokesperson for Parkinson. She's been in Michael J. Fox commercials. She has young-onset. I think she's like 3 or 4 years into it, and some of the stuff that she saw me post kind of stung a little bit. She's like, oh, wow, this opened her eyes to what maybe her husband's going through and her children are going through. She reached out to me. We started chatting back and forth, and I said, why don't we take what we're talking about back and forth in private and just go public with it? And the idea, it's called The Light We Hold. And it's so I have HeldLight is on YouTube, and I'm still not sure where I'm going with this, but we came up with The Light We Hold, which that kind of tagline is her and I speak on behalf of the person caring for somebody with Parkinson's, and then she speaks from the perspective of somebody with Parkinson's disease, which is really good because she'll say some things every now and then where I'm like, wow, I didn't consider that my wife was going through that. And I'll say things that she'll be like, wow, I didn't consider that my husband was going through that. And so we've filmed 3 so far. We dropped the first one. I'm going to do another one on Sunday. We'll drop it. The first one was more kind of get to know each other. The one that's coming out Sunday is children. the suffering in silence is a term used a lot, but when you're dealing with a young illness, and there are children involved with that young illness, the children, in my opinion, are the ones truly suffering in silence. And where's their voice? Who's speaking out for them and who's looking out for them? Because I learned the hard way that my kid was being neglected because I was too self-absorbed. So, and then the third one, we get into some of the healthcare issues. I learned that she was a hospital administrator before, and so she can speak intelligently to that. And we got into some of the differences between in-home healthcare and respite and things like that. We haven't done a fourth one yet because we just it's the same thing. We just wing it. Like, hey, you want to talk about kids? Yeah, let's do that. All right, let's dial in tomorrow. So
wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing those. I think you guys are going to have a lot to contribute. Thanks for being here today. This is our last episode before the holidays. And, the message of keeping going, keeping paddling, imagining the importance of past Christmas memories alive in the Christmas of this year or the holiday of this year, no matter what winter season holiday you celebrate, it doesn't matter. It's the celebration of togetherness, and which is most important. And what I've heard from you today is that there's space for togetherness with oneself and the person we love and care for always. And I think it's amazing how you've kept that space alive. So happy holidays to you and your family. And that goes out to all listeners today. We're so grateful to have been a part of your lives thus far on the podcast, and look forward to sharing an amazing array of guests come up. And we consider you, Brent, as part of the Caregivers podcast family. And we look forward to hearing updates from you and keeping in touch.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing while you're still recording, and it's to you, Doc. This is why I really was like, I want to talk to this guy, is there's a lot of physicians out there that don't treat the caregiver. You're so target fixated on the patient. And even more importantly, as a paramedic, I spoke on the phone with you. As a paramedic, we're taught treat the patient, not the monitor. And what I like about what you're doing is you're approaching this as a physician who looks at the whole person concept and what the people who are the loved one of the one sick are going through. Whereas, 20 years of going to doctors with my wife, they're just running the algorithm. And I appreciate what you're doing as not just with trying to get the voice of the caregivers, but the fact that you're a provider, that you're an actual medical doctor going, I see you guys. And as somebody who is a caregiver who has been around doctors his whole career, I appreciate what you're doing. So this is my thanks to you. More doctors need to step the f up and do what you're doing. So I really appreciate that.
Let's make 2026 a good one.
Yeah, man.
Best wishes. So if you're listening to this today and you feel soul tired, I want you to hear what Brent just said. Your burnout's not a failure of love. It's proof that you've been carrying more than any one human is often meant to carry alone. You have permission to stop pretending this is easy. You have permission to actually want to rest without feeling selfish in choosing that. And most importantly, remember, your life is larger than the role you're carrying right now. You're still here. You still matter. To everyone caring for someone else today, we see you and we wish you a peaceful holiday season. I'll see you next time. And until we meet again. Before we wrap up, I wanted to remind you of something important. The conversations you hear on this podcast are here to inform, to support, to spark reflection. They're not a substitute for professional medical advice, care, therapy, or crisis services. Listening to this podcast does not create a doctor-patient or caregiver-client relationship between us. If you're facing a medical concern, health challenge, a mental health challenge, or a caregiving situation that needs guidance, I encourage you to reach out to a qualified professional who knows your story. If you're ever in crisis, please don't wait. Call your local emergency number or recognize crisis hotline right away. You deserve real-time help and support. The views you hear on this show, whether from me or my guests, are our own. They don't necessarily reflect any organizations we work with or are part of or have worked with or been part of in the past. This podcast is an independent production. It's not tied to any hospital, university, or healthcare system. Thank you for being here, for listening, and most of all, for taking the time to care for yourself while you continue to care for others. I look forward to hearing from you.